Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdson of World Alternative Media here, and we're joined by Tim Picciott, the Liberty Advisor, thelibertyadvisor.com. He's a certified financial planner, and we've got a lot to go into today as we see the housing market. The tremors are shaking up the entire world. It's not just one country, it's not just one city, it is everywhere. We're seeing the effects of essentially the collapse of a global economy here. And obviously, a big part of the Great Reset is you'll own nothing and you'll be happy, and you'll be pushed into a situation where you don't own your own property. And essentially, I believe that this housing market situation is a huge part of that step towards completely controlling people, including where they live, food rations, and of course, the roads they drive on. We're going to go into that a little bit later. But first, I wanted to mention a few different articles. Like this one out of Yahoo Money, it says housing. We're at a tipping point for home prices, economist says. High mortgage rates are finally carving out early signs of a cooling housing market. According to the latest S&P CoreLogic Case-Shiller report, U.S. home values increased 20.4% in April, down from the prior month's revised climb of 20.6%. While April posted the largest jump in home price growth since the start of the data series, the pace slowed for the first time since November 2021. The slight deceleration occurred as mortgage rates topped 5% for the first time during the last week of April, an early indication of how quickly the once blistering hot housing market has calmed down. It really has, and we have other ones here. This is out of New York Times. Highest mortgage rates since 2008 housing crisis cool sales as the Federal Reserve tries to fight inflation. Costly mortgage rates have begun to price people out of the market. Miami housing rents jump a stunning 41% in April, says Zero Hedge. We have another one out of Zero Hedge here. It says 4 million Americans priced out as home rents rise significantly. Home loan qualifications skyrocket. Another one here out of Zero Hedge says commercial real estate is on the brink, and it goes over a whole bunch of different examples. There's a lot of major economic think tanks that are talking about this issue. Another one from Zero Hedge says housing crash imminent. As mortgage rates explode, price cuts soar, and buyer demand collapses. And the chart for the 30-year mortgage rate, and then, of course, the home buyer mortgage payments chart here. I mean, it really tells you, we're looking at a hockey stick here, my friends. It's crazy. And then finally, out of Market Watch, it says, prepare yourself. The U.S. housing market is at the beginning stages of the most significant contraction in activity since 2006. All right, let's go into this, Tim. This is where we're seeing headlines pile up, and it's not just, alt media. Like, we've been warning about the tremors for a long time. The bubbles that we saw in places like LA, like in Seattle, that we've seen for so long, in New York City, and of course in Canada, places like Vancouver and Toronto. I mean, it really has headline needs for years, but it just kept going up. It just kept getting pushed up, propped up, pushed up. And now we're seeing, push come to shove, and we're seeing a massive tremor in the general housing market. Obviously, there's hyper-localized markets that are, very much different from each other. But generally speaking, we're seeing what looks like the beginning of a major collapse scenario. Can you go into a little bit of what you think is happening to the real estate market and mortgages, and what do you expect to see in the near future?
Thanks. Well, the first thing I find odd is that everything has exploded this is given the fact that supposedly we're in this big pandemic with everybody dying, and we've been in this for 2 years now. And so if everyone's dying, shouldn't housing prices be going down, not, basically exploding in places like we're in right now in Phoenix? I mean, a lot of housing over the last 2 years is up, well over 50%. Some houses are up over 100%. I can tell from personal experience, I made the complete wrong move and canceled a home that was being built in March of 2020. And that was for about $420,000, and now that home is worth $900,000. So we're talking 2 years later. Supposedly, all these people died. Supposedly we're in this big pandemic, and now all of a sudden, housing has doubled. I mean, riddle me that, how that ends up happening. And so what's going on right now is very tricky to assess how it's ultimately going to break down, because I wouldn't be surprised the Federal Reserve is going to be running some sort of like secret program, whether it's, in the Cayman Islands, or whether they have some sort of shell program. I'm not saying they are doing this. I'm just saying I wouldn't be surprised if they, actually, I wouldn't be surprised if they are doing it. And it actually also was supposed to happen this month. Now, I didn't check today what happened, but as of yesterday, the Federal Reserve balance sheet month over month actually went up. So this was the month that they were supposed to start selling bonds. And so how did their balance sheet go up when they're supposed to start selling bonds So obviously that didn't happen, and so this could everything that we're saying right now or that I'm saying right now is subject to change. But if the Fed is going to keep raising rates and everything is going to keep going along with it, say it is, but then again, they also said in May that they weren't going to raise rates by 75 basis points in June. Then in June they rose it by 75 basis points. So who the hell cares what the Federal Reserve says at this point? Obviously, our listeners and you people out there realize this, and so I'm not obviously trying to show for the Fed because they've been wrong and lying for pretty much the past 14 years and probably pretty much since their existence in 1913. But what's tricky about the housing market is with these rates going up, and let's say you're in a 2.8% mortgage, and right now the mortgages rates are, I don't know what it is right this second, let's say it's 5.7. I think 2 weeks ago at one point it was even briefly over 6 for a day or two. But if you're in a mortgage of 3 and now the mortgage rate's closer to 6, most people are not going to jump out of a situation where they're at 3 to go into 6, because now all of a sudden their interest rates are just exploding, which means at that point there's going to be a very tight supply of homes, which actually could sort of buoy the prices of homes, especially when you have people like Blackstone. I know a lot of times people use Blackstone and Blackrock interchangeably, but a lot of times when it comes to actually residential real estate, it's actually Blackstone that is actually bigger than that. And actually Blackstone actually owns the place that we're talking in right now. And now I didn't know that when I rented the place after canceling the other one that we had talked about. But yeah, right now we actually are shilling for Blackstone, and ultimately the company that owns this home is then owned by Blackstone 100%. So
well, and I think Blackstone and Blackrock are both very much part of the game plan, especially with the Great Reset agenda. And I believe this is a huge part of it. I think it has huge implications because, again, home rents on average hit $2,000 a month, and you were talking about that recently, and it just blows my mind. It's not really surprising. It just blows my mind that we're at a point now, the point that many of us have been warning about for so long, that this is it. We're in the thick of this now, and it's going to get worse before it gets better. But of course, I think a big part of this is a Great Reset agenda. Like I said, if people, and I said this at the very beginning of 2020, we're talking like February and March 2020, if they come in with moratoriums on rents and they're giving like stimmies out and all this kind of stuff, eventually what we're going to see is, well, they're going to take away the moratoriums. People aren't going to be able to pay for their homes. People aren't going to be able to rent their homes. And eventually the government's going to say, don't worry, we'll save you. We'll give you a bunch of free properties, maybe tiny homes in big city centers, so that we can, accomplish our Agenda 2030 depopulation agenda at the same time as also not allow you to own property. So eventually the solution is, we're going to come in and save you with this property that's based on your social credit score, and we're going to have carbon credits for driving, and we're going to have food rations tied to your social credit and your vaccine passes. I mean, this is what the World Economic Forum openly says they want eventually, and they say you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. I don't think people are going to be very happy when they can't own their own property, other than if they just give everyone so many gifts, free Obama phones or whatever it might be, and it's all based in the idea of convenience, because tyranny comes under the guise of convenience. Where do you think this market, how do you think the market would react to a complete takeover by things like BlackRock, Blackstone, the Vanguard, all these major institutions that have been basically buying up land everywhere? It seems like there's obviously a conspiracy somewhere there to basically kick us out of the market as individuals and create just a massive corporatized market. It already exists.
Well, I mean, if they're there with basically an automatic demand, there being Blackstone and BlackRock are there with an automatic demand, and now you have a tighter supply. So if you have less supply because people aren't necessarily willing to sell their home because they don't want to move from a 3% mortgage to a 6% mortgage, right, while you have demand being pretty much automatic from the players we just mentioned, then it actually could be a situation where it could send prices higher. However, when I talk to sort of like the average normie person that's out there, which I try not to do very often, but for the cases of trying to get intel, it does seem like even when I talk to the more normal type of person that's out there that aren't necessarily our listener type of people, that a lot of people, the general feeling is that things are very frothy, and that hey, we had a house that was worth $500,000 last year or 2 years ago, and now it's worth $1 million or $900,000, and wouldn't it be nice to just check out and go to Costa Rica or check out and go to maybe a smaller place where we can live and not have to worry about paying a mortgage and going through the normal rat race and doing that. And so I've heard that a ton from just like the normal average everyday person. However, people do have things like they have kids that might still be in school, or there's reasons why they might not necessarily be able to move. And so I think it's easier to talk about that than to actually implement that, because then the other problem is, okay, you then sell your home and then you have to pay an astronomical through the nose rent, if you want to live in the same area. So there's not really like an easy type of answer, but right now, everything is being rigged, everything is being engineered and manufactured. And maybe, one of the things, and I have seen recently too, because I've been on Zillow quite a bit, and I've actually been outbid on 2 different properties that I put, either full price or above full price offers in on more like off-grid type stuff. And so it does show that, maybe there's other people looking to do what a lot of us are looking to do, which is to try to get off-grid, which is to try to be more self-sufficient and, basically increase our odds of survival when the Great Reset occurs, and as the Great Reset is happening. But no one knows exactly how it's going to shake out. But I think ultimately, though, the Fed could acquiesce, and then they could lower rates. And then when they do lower rates again, because they need to stimulate the economy somehow, or they need to pay for all this out of control congressional spending at some point. I mean, it's very telling when they've been talking about how they're going to lower the balance sheet. In 2018, they said they're going to start lowering the balance sheet, and it peaked at $50 billion a month in October, which was their upper limit. And guess what? Within 2 months, the Fed was back to buying bonds, was back to bringing the rates basically down to zero. You had the whole plunge protection team out there right around Christmas time of 2018, and so then their balance sheet went from $4 trillion to basically $9 trillion, and now they're saying it's 8.9. So now they're going to say they're going to bring it from 8.9 down to zero. I mean, I'm placing bets that I bet within 5 years it'll be closer to 20 trillion than it will be closer to zero. I mean, I would pretty much bet the farm it's going to be closer to 20 than it is to zero 5 years from now, because there's no way they can. The only way they can accomplish this, and I'll try saying this without laughing, is if Congress can actually balance the budget. And we know there's a 0% chance in that, because we don't believe in unicorns and other things out here, that there's no way that that's going to happen. So unless Congress can balance the budget, the Fed's going to have to keep printing money. And guess what happens? When they raise interest rates, it then means that the interest on the debt is exploding. And at a certain point 2 years ago, they were able to get 10-year bonds for like 0.3%, and now they're closer to 3%. So then your interest expense goes up 10x, and then all of a sudden you're at the point you're paying $1 trillion a year in interest. Well, then now you're even more screwed, because now your basically budget deficit even grows even wider, which means you need to print even more money to pay off that, but you can never pay it off. You're just rolling it over and then keep extending the maturities. So actually, paradoxically, raising rates creates inflation, because now the government owes even more money in interest, and there's no way out of it. And the thing is, the Fed's not really trapped, because they tried getting us in there. And the higher the rates go, the more money the Fed makes, because the Fed gets to keep 6% of all the interest of all the debt, and they spin it as, we give back 94% of the profit. Bullshit. They keep 6% of everything, and so it actually behooves them to mess things up. It behooves them to have a larger balance sheet, because they are making more money, because our money is privately owned, because it's not our money, it's our debt. And it's not really even our debt. We were foisted upon this system where the money is debt, so there is no way to pay off the debt, because the money is debt.
Absolutely. And by the way, if you want to become a client of Tim Picciott, you could go to thelibertyadvisor.com, and you can find a bunch of his work at thelibertyadvisorshow.com as well, all linked in the description of this video. I believe this is all rigged. It's a rigged collapse of the housing market in order to control the populace, just like we're seeing with inflation. Eventually, inflation, the way they manipulated the currency for so long was very useful to them, and they were able to control and enslave people with that, with the poverty, with the debt, with all these different things. Well, now push comes to shove, and the basic economic 101 will tell you you print a bunch of currency and eventually it's going to collapse. We're seeing that collapse now, and now they're trying to manipulate that into their own benefit. And of course, that was always going to be the case once we got to that point. They weren't going to go, oops, sorry, my bad, you guys were right, we were wrong. That'll never happen. And I want to point out, by the way, that due to people getting basically priced out of the housing market in so many places, there's a huge amount of people all moving right now to Mexico to get homes. I know I live in Mexico most of the time, and the prices there are going up like significantly as well. But compared to the United States and compared to the rate of inflation and the wages, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, not as much. So, Tim, I mean, I've always said, the biggest solution is to be self-sustainable individual, get out of big cities, get away from big highways, build your own. Look, I know I would say rent over buy right now. It just generally speaking, not investment advice, but more, besides, your house is not an asset unless you're actually you're getting that money out of it. But I mean, I do think that despite how bad the housing market is, it's probably still a better idea to have bug out land at a high price than be, essentially stuck in a big city and, consumed by the tyranny, the globalism, the things that we're seeing today on a huge scale. And on top of that, just being able to grow your own, dig your own wells, catch your own fish, get your own food, do all these things are extremely important. And of course, I have heavensharvest.com where you could use code WHAM to get heirloom seeds and storable foods that are non-GMO, and water filtration, water storage, survival resources, gardening resources, all extremely important stuff, as well as whamsurvival.com for long-term storable foods where you save a bunch of money if you go through us. Again, with heavensharvest.com, use code WHAM, and that's WAM, and you get free shipping inside of the United States on most goods. And even if you're outside of the U.S., you should still use code WHAM, because why not? It helps both sides here. So again, there's different resources. But Tim, what do you think are like good solutions for people in the case of people they want to own their own property? They don't want to just rent from like Blackrock or something, or some like Blackrock owned, apartment complex in a big city, but also they don't want to buy into a market that is heading for a free fall, most likely. What would you tell people at that point when they're in this kind of quandary?
I mean, the biggest thing, obviously depends on what someone's job is. So, if they have flexibility where they can be more nomad or they can work digitally, that's one thing, because you can work digitally from anywhere. And then I would say, hey, move out of, like a San Francisco, LA, New York City, and just move somewhere a lot cheaper where you don't have to, be in that sustained rat race, and then be in a position where you can actually, get ahead in life, because if you're constantly, having your rents getting jacked up 20% a year and your income's only going up a few percent, it's very hard to ever get ahead. Now, I also want to point out that I think one of the areas that's going to get hit, particularly hard would probably be the new home builds, because it's one thing if you have existing homes, and like I mentioned, you're at a 3% mortgage, the new home would be 6%, but if your house cost you $200,000 and now it's worth $700,000, maybe it was worth $700,000 3 months ago, or 6 months ago, but now maybe you can get $600 out of it. Well, you're still up pretty massively. However, in a new home build situation, when you have raw materials like lumber and land and other things that, go into all this stuff, and the fact that all these have skyrocketed while at the same point the mortgage rates have skyrocketed, I think you're going to see a lot of the new home builders, unless the Fed acquiesces and is able, but then again, even if the Fed acquiesces, it's probably going to raise the commodities up, which would then raise the underlying prices of these homes. And so, I think just north of me, they're trying to put in like 17,000 homes. It's going to be very hard to, in this environment at like a 6% interest rate to put in 17,000 homes. And it's not like the home builders can really give a lot of discounts, because, maybe they're, I don't know, I'm just making this up, maybe they're on like a 25%, sort of markup. Well, then, if your raw materials, cost X, there's only, so far down you can go. And so, so I think a lot of the new home builders, if the Fed doesn't acquiesce, they could be in a lot of trouble. But existing homes, I think you might see like a resurgence of people trying to, get out while they can right now. But then the issue is that if the Fed then acquiesces, then we could see the market still rocketing higher, because it is a complete rigged market. But I would say, make sure your income is in such a situation where, you're not necessarily tied down to a desk, not tied down to one location, and then be able to work anywhere. And some people are like, oh, it might be easier for you to say. Well, it wasn't easy for me to say, the first several years, I was doing this and making basically, probably minimum wage. And so it takes the point where you can build things up, and nothing that is worth having is going to be easy to do. And so, if you want to live, if you want to survive, if you want to prosper, it is going to take some work. And so maybe and odds are you're probably not in a job that you love anyways. And so there are things you could be doing to build up side hustles, be able to get other income streams going, rather than just, sit around and complain. And so, and ideally that is, essentially that is what you are doing. If you're like, oh, well, I can't do anything. People are not plants. People are not supposed to just be stuck in one spot. And ultimately, this is a game of survival. And so, it's going to be, I think, going to come down to a survival of the fittest. And and by putting yourself in a position where you are, more off-grid, more sustainable, not near major highways, all the things Josh has been talking about, growing your own food, getting things like Heaven's Harvest, getting things like, prepare with wham.com. Is it prepare with?
Whamsurvival.com.
Sorry, whamsurvival.com. And these are all things where, I am practicing what I'm preaching up here, and I was, into, gardening and seeds and all this stuff, before all this, and you need to be, you can't wait until the food runs out to learn how to grow food, because it's not super easy, especially, you got to look into things like fertilizers, and those are pretty much in short supply right now. Yeah. But lastly, one more thing is, if you want to, we'll have a link down below where you can schedule directly with me, and I am offering free portfolio reviews for people that listen to Josh and myself on here. So if you are interested in that, we'll have a link down below, because what is going to work in the beginning stages of the Great Reset, like things like cash and and oil, things that work in the beginning of the Great Reset, and then there's things that don't work in the beginning, like obviously like Bitcoin, but then there's things at the end after the Great Reset already occurs, the worst thing to be in cash. And so there is like this dichotomy of how to split up assets to try to make sure you've got something at the end of this, because I think they're going to try to scare the bejesus out of everybody, they being the Fed and the powers that be, move everyone into cash, and then they go to this cashless society where we're on a central bank digital currency, and then for those of you in cash, those of you in bonds, especially long-term bonds, it's pretty much going to be game over. And so I'd also recommend checking out the CBDC presentation that we came out with recently as well. But it's anyone's guess right now, because it is such a rigged market. The Fed thinks they're playing around with a thermostat, and they can just dial things up a little bit, but what they're really playing around with is a nuclear reactor, and every time they try to turn things up and down, there's massive unforeseen moves that they don't know, especially that they don't know are going to happen. And it's anyone's guess how it's going to play out, but I would be as prepared as possible going into this, and don't say we didn't try to tell you.
Absolutely. And again, if you want to become a client of Tim Picciott, go to thelibertyadvisor.com and check out thelibertyadvisorshow.com, and we got the link for the free portfolio reviews. And by the way, my friends, like a good example of what he was kind of talking about earlier, it's like, oh, don't say you can't. It's just the excuses are absurd, because our friend Carl from the Moon, the YouTube channel that's now massive, and he's being found like one of the entrepreneurs of the year in crypto and all that kind of stuff. He's on magazine covers. He's in Dubai, he's with F2, and he's just working on all this crazy stuff, and he's young. I think he's younger than me. And he was at the Red Bull thing today with Formula. Well, but here's the thing. He was a cashier a couple years ago, and he didn't get a loan. He got money and put it aside from it, and didn't go out and have a bunch of fun every day, and didn't, spend all of his money on stupid stuff and materialistic stuff. He put it into crypto, for example, and built up a portfolio that became worth millions upon millions upon millions of dollars. I mean, everyone that says, oh, I can't because I'm stuck and I'm doing this or that, I'm sure there's a lot of circumstances that are almost impossible to get around, but not impossible, and they are possible to, actually build from and make better choices going forward for your life. I mean, again, we're at the end stage of an economic system and the beginning stage of a very evil one. I mean, the one that we're in is pretty evil, but we're going into an even worse one. And if we're not getting prepared, my friends, then we unfortunately will reap the consequences that we sow. And that is really unfortunate for so many, because the vast majority of the world are going to unfortunately end up reaping those consequences, vaccinated or not. Like, people who are unvaccinated, a lot of them are still not ready and still not prepared. That's 50% of the world. And then the people who are vaccinated, yeah, they're definitely pretty screwed. And by the way, I want to before I close off this video, I just found out before I did this video, Dr. Zelenko passed away, and I want to say rest in peace to him, and my thoughts are with his family and all his loved ones. Very sad, because he was one of the heroes speaking out against this tyranny since the beginning of 2020, and he deserves our respects and remembrance. So rest in peace, Dr. Zelenko. Now, anyway, I'm going to finish this off here. I appreciate everyone watching. There's so much going on, and we will be updating you with lots more very shortly. Of course, as always, check those links below. We have whamsurvival.com for long-term storable food, so you save money through us. We have heavensharvest.com, where you could use code WHAM, W-A-M, and you get free shipping in the U.S. and still use it if it's being shipped outside of the U.S., like Canada and places like that. We're going to get links for you if you're in Australia and Britain and other places too soon. It's very hard to get all this stuff together, and we're working on what we can to make sure that we can get everyone prepared as possible, because again, it's not about making money, it's about pushing people just a bit over the line so they can actually go, hey, I need to take some responsibility over my life, and I don't want to end up being stepped on by the boot of the authoritarian state for the rest of my life until my demise. I don't want to be a cattle on the farm sacrificed. I don't want to be a pawn sacrificed for the king and the queen. It's important that you guys get prepared. So if I can influence people to get prepared, that is a great honor of mine, and I want to do that in as many ways as I humanly can by just talking about the very basic but very real threats that we face on a daily basis from this globalist, tyrannical, anti-human, child, anti-good state, this thing that has been, this behemoth that has grown, this cancer that's growing, that's anti-empathy, that wants to destroy humanity from the inside out. We must fight back. And a great way to fight back is by living by example, being human, being empathetic, being conscious, being prepared. Of course, we have rncstore.com, Richardson Nutritional Center as well, your source for Laetrile online, made famous by G. Edward Griffin's book, World Without Cancer. Get your apricot seeds, Laetrile, amygdalin, and vitamin B17 there. Cancer is a big issue right now, and there are ways to prepare for that as well. Of course, we have GoGetFunding.com, Patreon, Subscribestar, we have a PayPal address, we have a Bitcoin address, we have a Cointree link, we have multiple different cryptocurrencies on that Cointree link. We have Epic Fund Me, where we have Epic Cash donations. So many ways to get around this system, and one of the things that we really need as an independent media organization is the help from the viewer, because of course we aren't the mainstream media. We don't have billions of dollars coming in from Pfizer and Moderna and the State Department to make us propagandize people. We are on our own trying to build a world of people who understand the truth and are prepared for what's coming to them. We are just trying to prepare people for the war on humanity so that they could fight for humanity, and that's extremely important to the future of mankind. We are seeing a civilizational collapse. They're building a Tower of Babel. We need to create a new civilization to replace the old guard, the evil guard system. Of course, we have a Teespring store with a bunch of merchandise. We have a ton of great stuff on there. We have our Telegram group, World Alternative Media, our Telegram channel, World Alternative Media announcements, and then of course Tim has the Liberty Advisor. I think it's the Liberty Advisor show on Telegram. It's show, right?
I think it might be the Liberty Advisor on Telegram.
Okay, just look up the Liberty Advisor and look for a image of his face as the image. It's pretty easy. Again, that's on Telegram. And we have our newsletter, www.imband.com. Of course, we are on Rockfin, where we do exclusive content from time to time. You guys got to send us questions for us to do Q&As. So we can't do any Q&As with you guys until you guys send us questions. So if you are subscribing on Rockfin, where we have documentaries and exclusive premieres of videos like Tim's presentation on central bank digital currencies, which is now out forever, but nonetheless, we have premieres on there. We have all sorts of videos exclusively for people who subscribe, $9.99, I believe, a month on there. Make sure to go over there and make sure to ask questions so we can do videos on those. Of course, we are now on band.video. Again, a big shout out to Michael Zimmerman and Alex Jones for making that possible. And of course, we're on BitChute, Odyssey, Rumble, and Brighteon at World Alternative Media. We are, of course, on Hive, Steemit, and Float.app at Josh Sigurdson. Tim is on a whole bunch of these other platforms as well at the Liberty Advisor. And of course, we're on the bad guys, TikTok and Instagram, World Alternative Media, Twitter and Getter at World Alt Media, and we're on all the popular podcast platforms like Spotify, Podbean, worldaltmedia.podbean.com. Just check those links in the description. Apple Podcasts, Safari, Google Podcasts, for the time being anyway, until they kick us off. So go and check those out and give us a good rating on things like Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts. Anyway, we will be back at you with much, much more. Check out thelibertyadvisor.com and thelibertyadvisorshow.com in the description, my friends. Hit that like button, share on social media, hit the notification bell, and hit subscribe. Until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson and Tim Picciott signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.
I'm sure you have already changed people's minds in your young age because you're involved, and I like that.